On a calm Friday afternoon in Japan, the ground lurched beneath millions, buildings swaying, alarms blaring. At 2:46 p.m. local time, the strongest earthquake in the nation's history ripped open the seafloor by up to 50 meters. In moments, the ocean itself retreated in silence, exposing secrets ancient warnings could barely explain. Some recognized the sign, others hesitated. What followed would not just drown towns, but trigger the most documented catastrophe and an unprecedented nuclear crisis. What really happened in the first crucial minutes before the black wave split the sea? At 2:46 p.m. Japan Standard Time, the seismic network at the Japan Meteorological Agency jolted to life. Sensors across the country registered a rupture deep beneath the Pacific, off the Tohoku coast. Within seconds, the JMA Earthquake Early Warning System began calculating, pushing alerts to broadcasters, phones, and public sirens. The agency's analysts, trained for speed, saw the initial readings spike higher than almost any they had witnessed. Early estimates put the magnitude at 7.9, then 8.4. But the numbers kept climbing as the rupture tore along the subduction zone. The ground convulsed for 6 full minutes. In Tokyo, more than 370 kilometers from the epicenter, skyscrapers rocked on their foundations, glass swinging in office towers, commuters gripping handrails as floors undulated beneath them. Across northeastern Honshu, the shaking was relentless. Drawers flew open, walls cracked, power lines whipped violently. The quake's rupture zone stretched nearly 500 kilometers, with the seafloor shifting as much as 50 meters in places, a scale that would soon reveal itself in the waves to come. Inside the Japan Meteorological Agency Central Operations Room, analysts scrambled to refine their estimates. The earthquake's energy overwhelmed standard algorithms, which plateaued at lower magnitudes. As the seconds ticked by, more data streamed in from the agency's high-sensitivity stations and GPS networks. Coastal subsidence and horizontal displacement registered on monitors. Towns near the epicenter dropped by up to 1 meter, while entire regions shifted several meters eastward. The first official earthquake warning was issued almost immediately, followed by a major tsunami warning just 3 minutes after the rupture began. Radio and television cut instantly to emergency broadcasts, and the J-Alert system triggered municipal sirens along the Pacific coast. But the true scale of the event was still unfolding in real time. JMA analysts watched as their models struggled to keep pace, each revision pushing the estimated magnitude higher, 8.8, then 8.9, until finally, after the waves had already begun their journey, the event was recognized as a magnitude 9.1. The strongest earthquake ever recorded in Japan had begun a chain reaction. In those first minutes, the only certainty was that the clock was running. For the communities along the Tohoku coastline, the window to escape was narrowing with every tremor, every update, every second lost to uncertainty. What started as a distant rupture was now a national emergency, and the next threat was already racing toward shore. Beneath the Pacific, 2 tectonic plates collided with a violence that defies imagination. In less than 3 minutes, the seafloor near Tohoku lurched as much as 50 meters, one of the largest slips ever measured by finite fault models. This invisible rupture sent a shock through the water column, forcing the ocean upward and then outward, setting in motion a chain of events that would soon become visible along the coast. At first, there was only silence. Then, in harbors from Kamaishi to Ofunato, the water began to drain away. Boats that had floated moments before now groaned and tilted, their hulls scraping the exposed mud. Fishermen, some with memories of the 1960 Chilean tsunami, recognized the sign immediately. The sea's sudden withdrawal was no ordinary low tide. It was the oldest warning nature could give. In Kesennuma, radios sputtered to life with urgent voices saying the sea is pulling back, get out, get to high ground. Crews scrambled, cutting mooring lines with knives, engines coughing as they rushed to start. Some boats pushed out toward deeper water, gambling that speed and experience might keep them ahead of whatever was coming. On shore, the scene was split between action and hesitation. Shouts echoed across the docks, warnings passed from person to person, sometimes amplified by loudspeakers, sometimes lost in the confusion. Some residents saw the exposed seabed, littered with stranded fish and seaweed, and remembered the stories told by grandparents, stories of the ocean's retreat as the sign to run. They grabbed children, abandoned bicycles and shopping bags, and began the climb uphill, sometimes with only seconds to spare. Others, less certain or trusting in the strength of concrete seawalls, lingered near the waterfront, watching the spectacle unfold. For a moment, the coastline seemed frozen in time, the normal boundaries between land and sea erased. Above the shore, ancient tsunami stones stood silent, their carved warnings that said, "Do not build below this point," a message from ancestors who had seen the sea vanish before. In Aniyoshi, families who lived above these markers already stood beyond the reach of disaster, their homes and memories shaped by past waves. But in towns where memory had faded or been replaced by modern defenses, hesitation cost precious time. The ocean's retreat was brief, a matter of minutes. In harbors and on beaches, the exposed ground hinted at the force gathering offshore, a force about to return with devastating speed. As the horizon darkened, the split-second decisions of fishermen and residents, whether to run, wait, or warn others, became a matter of life and death. The first visible sign of the tsunami was not the wave itself, but the absence of the sea, a warning written in water and remembered in stone. Less than 30 minutes after the earthquake, the first tsunami waves began to strike the Tohoku coast. In Miyako, the ocean surged over the top of a concrete seawall built to withstand past disasters. The water, black with debris, rose quickly, engulfing port warehouses, sweeping cars and boats from the docks, and swallowing entire blocks in minutes. The Taro district, once considered a model of coastal defense, saw its massive barriers overtopped and then torn apart. The waves, measured later at over 40 meters in nearby Anayoshi, erased the line between sea and land. Homes, offices, and schools vanished beneath the torrent. Rikuzentakata faced devastation on a scale few could imagine. The city's shallow bay funneled the force of the tsunami straight into its heart. More than 80% of the town's 8,000 houses were destroyed or swept away. Multi-story buildings disappeared beneath the advancing water. Streets filled with the wreckage of lives, cars, timber, fishing boats, and entire rooftops carried kilometers inland. The single pine tree left standing among a forest of 30,000 became known as the Miracle Pine, a lone survivor in a landscape scoured to its foundations. In Ishinomaki, the tsunami pressed far up the Kitakami River, overrunning levees and flooding low-lying neighborhoods. The water advanced more than 5 kilometers inland across the plain, scattering fishing vessels and cargo containers into fields and residential streets. Traffic jams trapped families on evacuation routes, while others sought shelter in schools and public buildings, many of which would not withstand the rising flood. The death toll in Ishinomaki would become the highest of any city struck that day. Throughout the Sanriku coast, entire communities disappeared in the span of an hour. The force of the waves left behind little but bare concrete slabs and tangled debris. In some places, the only markers of what once stood were the foundations of homes and the outlines of roads now buried under mud and splintered wood. Survivors climbed to high ground and watched as the world they knew was swept away, the scale of loss growing with every minute the black water advanced inland. The destruction was relentless. The boundaries between town and sea erased as the tsunami carved a new landscape along the coast. Cameras did not blink as the tsunami took shape. In 2011, more digital recorders were running on Japan's coast than at any point in history. Dash cams on highways, security cameras in ports, rooftop cell phones in city centers. Each lens became an unflinching witness, capturing the disaster in real time and from every angle. Dashcam footage from Miyagi and Iwate shows drivers halted on coastal roads, staring at a black wall of water that swallows the horizon. Within seconds, cars are lifted, spun, and swept inland, their movement as helpless as driftwood. On bridges and bypasses, the wave surges over guardrails, carrying entire lanes of traffic into the torrent. These recordings, time-stamped and geotagged, have been used by researchers to reconstruct the precise arrival of the first and second waves, matching video frames to tide gauge data and GPS logs. Security cameras in harbors and factories documented the moment seawalls were overtopped. In Kamaishi, a government port camera captured the world's largest breakwater disappear beneath the surge. Warehouses collapse as the water advances, steel doors crumpling, and boats hurled through parking lots. In Ishinomaki and Kesanuma, factory CCTV reveals the speed of the flood, the waterline climbing from ankle height to the eaves of buildings in less than a minute. From rooftops, survivors aimed their phones and camcorders at the streets below. In Rikuzentakata, a municipal office camera kept rolling as the wave crashed through the city center. The audio is raw, shouts of Hayaku Nigero, as people urge each other to run, prayers and instructions echoing above the roar. Some rooftop videos capture the moment power fails, the city plunging into darkness as the water rises. NHK helicopters relayed images of the Sendai Plain, a gray tide sweeping over farmland and highways, scattering shipping containers and entire houses. International news crews, already on the ground for earthquake coverage, broadcast live as the tsunami struck. Global feeds carried these images within minutes, turning private tragedy into shared witness. Every angle, every timestamp, became a forensic tool. Scientists and investigators have since synchronized dozens of these clips, using landmarks and metadata to map the wave's progression block by block. The 2011 tsunami is not just remembered, it is documented, frame by frame, by the very people and machines caught in its path. These records now serve as both evidence and warning, a digital archive of a disaster that unfolded in plain sight. At Fukushima Daiichi, the earthquake's shaking triggered an automatic shutdown of reactors 1 through 3. Operators in the control rooms watched as their instruments flickered, but the plant's emergency diesel generators kicked in, keeping vital cooling systems alive. For a brief window, the worst seemed avoidable. Then, at 3:35 in the afternoon, a wave nearly 15 meters high surged over the plant's 10-meter seawall. Seawater crashed through doors and vents, flooding the basements where the diesel generators and electrical switchgear were housed. Within minutes, the site lost all external and internal alternating current power, known as a station blackout. The control panels dimmed. Only battery power remained, and even that was limited. Operators scrambled to assess the damage, but much of their monitoring equipment was blind or unreliable. The isolation condenser in Unit 1, designed to cool the reactor without outside power, failed to function as intended. In Units 2 and 3, steam-driven pumps kept water circulating for a few precious hours, but these systems depended on direct current power that was draining fast. Inside the darkened control rooms, staff attempted to jury-rig connections, start fire engines, and bring in portable generators. Flooded roads and debris made outside help almost impossible. As the evening wore on, the water level inside Unit 1's reactor vessel dropped. By around 6:30 in the evening, the top of the fuel rods was exposed. Temperatures soared. Chemical reactions between the overheated fuel cladding and steam began producing hydrogen. By nightfall, Unit 1's core was melting. In Units 2 and 3, the situation was only marginally better. Their emergency cooling systems bought time, but as batteries depleted, operators lost the ability to monitor water levels and pressure. Without reliable readings, staff could only guess at the state of the reactors. Every attempt to inject water faced obstacles, blocked valves, dead batteries, and flooded pumps. The plant's director, Masao Yoshida, made urgent calls to TEPCO headquarters. requesting permission to vent pressure and inject seawater. Delays and confusion at the corporate and regulatory level slowed critical decisions. By midnight, the crisis had slipped beyond the reach of standard procedures. Within hours, 3 reactors would suffer full meltdowns. The Fukushima disaster was no longer a natural emergency. It had become a technological catastrophe on a scale not seen since Chernobyl. The tsunami and nuclear disaster left scars that run deeper than any map can show. In the weeks that followed, the true scale of loss became clear. More than 18,000 people were confirmed dead, their names filling government lists and family altars. Another 2,500 remained missing, their fates lost to the sea or buried beneath the ruins of coastal towns. Along the Tohoku coast, entire communities vanished. Neighborhoods in Miyako, Rikuzen-Takata, and Ishinomaki, once busy with markets and schools, became fields of debris and silence. The human toll extended far beyond the reach of the waves. Over 450,000 people were forced from their homes, many with nothing but the clothes they wore when the ground started shaking. Evacuation centers filled gymnasiums, schools, and public halls, where families slept on mats and waited for news. Some towns, especially in Fukushima Prefecture, were emptied overnight by government order. Radiation from the damaged Daiichi plant turned places like Okuma, Futaba, and Namie into ghost towns. Streets that once echoed with daily life stood deserted, their shops shuttered, playgrounds empty, and homes left to the weather. For many, there was no return. Fields went untended, and seasons passed without children's voices or the sound of festivals. The sense of loss was more than physical. Memories of ancestors, traditions, and livelihoods were swept away with the tide. Even as the rest of Japan sent supplies and volunteers, the scale of destruction defied easy recovery. The government's own reports estimated economic losses at over $235 billion, the highest ever recorded from a natural disaster. Factories, ports, and railways were destroyed or damaged beyond repair. Entire industries, from fishing to small manufacturing, collapsed in a single afternoon. In the shadow of the disaster, survivors faced choices no one should have to make, whether to rebuild on the land that betrayed them or to start over somewhere new. For thousands, the answer was decided by radiation maps and exclusion zones. For others, the decision came down to hope, memory, and the ache of empty streets. The cost of March 11th was measured not just in yen or lost buildings, but in the fracture of families and the erasure of entire ways of life. Today, more than 40% of the world's population lives near a coastline. Early warning systems continue to advance, but nature's scale still tests what we can prepare for. The scars in Tohoku remain, reminders that resilience is a daily act, not a finished project. Disasters do not wait for readiness. Our choices now decide what survives the next wave. Share your perspective below.